Welcome, and thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to host this special Earth Week event and to introduce you to an exciting partnership between USC and the City of Los Angeles. Each Earth Day that comes along becomes more important. Overcoming the climate crisis requires the kind of inclusive action that can only happen if we figure out how to leverage every asset we have as a local, national, and global community. LA's vision for sustainability reflects this big picture approach. Our city has an opportunity to be a model for the world. The ambitious Green New Deal put forward by Mayor Garcetti is rooted in collaboration. And we at USC are ready and willing to take on a leading role, helping our university experts work in step with community leaders and policymakers. Our joint Urban Trees project is a terrific example of the kind of innovation that can come from what we hope will be many partnerships in the years ahead. One of our top priorities at USC Dornsife has been to facilitate these partnerships in a whole new way. As we know, universities are outstanding at producing cutting-edge research, but our structure and size can make it hard sometimes to bring together the right group with the right expertise to solve the most pressing and relevant problems quickly and effectively. We founded Public Exchange, which led to this Urban Trees project, to do just that. We recognize that to make the full breadth of our expertise available to those outside our walls, we needed to start by asking our community partners the simple question, how can we help? Once we understand the needs of our partners, we can take the logistical and project management load off our researchers so they can focus on what they do best. And in doing so, we fast-track collaborations and improve accessibility. Public Exchange was launched this year, and we've already been able to work with some terrific partners, including several in the sustainability space. But the Urban Trees project has been the most complex and interdisciplinary so far. We know that there are real benefits that come from a robust urban tree canopy, benefits such as cooling and better air quality. LA lags behind many major cities in America when it comes to percentage of shade cover, so the obvious step is to plant more trees, but it's not that simple. Not all trees bring the same benefits. Not all locations can support trees. And like many cities around the world, a map of LA's trees is also a map of income, race, and human health. With the right strategy, we can improve both the environment and the quality of life for some of our most vulnerable communities. So this project began with Public Exchange, bringing members of our USC community together with LA's first city forestry officer, Rachel Mollerich, to ask what USC can do to help the city in the area of urban forestry. Thanks to our USC president, Carol Folt, we received the seed funding we needed to engage a truly interdisciplinary team of researchers and students across the university that included spatial scientists, earth scientists, and landscape architects. The team met with members of the local community to understand the specific needs and preferences for green space and developed a plan that will help guide the growth of an urban forest in East Side LA communities. The goal is not only to provide shade and cooling, but to identify the kinds of trees that are best at cleaning the air. Today, we have the pleasure of talking with Rachel Mollerich and President Folt about urban sustainability and the role that urban forests can play. And to get things started, we have a short video that offers a look at some of the research that drives our Urban Trees partnership.
Climate change is driving temperatures higher in Los Angeles. Trees can help us beat the heat. But it's not as simple as digging a hole and planting a tree. We need to know what kinds of trees to plant, where to plant them, and how many to plant. Convened by the USC Dornsife Public Exchange, the USC Urban Trees Initiative set out to provide the answers. Findings from the initiative will guide the city's program to plant an urban forest in the East Side communities of Lincoln Heights, El Sereno, and Ramona Gardens.
When it comes to combating extreme heat, trees are the most cost-effective way of doing that. Which species are the best species, most effective? What are the best investments for our city as it becomes hotter and drier, but we still want to live here?
Trees are a tremendous tool for us to address these urban issues of air quality and urban heat, as well as provide many other benefits like beautifying our communities. So how can we be thoughtful in those investments, and how can we meet the mayor's goal?
We're focused on those neighborhoods that are impacted by the highest temperatures and the worst air pollution. And our partners at USC are also researching canopy inequity and the potential impacts on the air quality near their health sciences campus just down the street here in Lincoln Heights.
The value that we bring to this project is creating a strategic decision-making process, a vision, before we go out there and dig holes and put trees in them. What are the most beneficial trees and where are they needed most?
The partnership with USC has allowed us to take a couple different lenses. We've got the lens of science through spatial sciences, we've got earth science, and we've got landscape architecture, and the community engagement component all together informing each other.
Community involvement was critical in the development of the Urban Tree Initiative. And we found that establishing a dialogue with them instead of a monologue really is going to help the research. And it was really going to help the university move forward, working with not only our local neighbors, but working with our elected officials to develop urban tree canopy that's going to benefit everyone in the neighborhood.
You have large swaths of the city that lack green cover. And green cover is going to bring you benefits in terms of health, in terms of shade, in terms of mitigating air pollution.
We've got a dozen sensors that we want to position around school buildings and let that be part of a network that tells us the quality of air on the neighborhood scale within LA. Behind me is Bravo High School in this study area that we're working in, and this is the location where we'd like to put at least one of these sensors and get some sense of what it means to be in an area that's, for example, rather close to the freeway.
I really want to make sure that we get this right. When we talk about planting 90,000 trees, when we talk about increasing tree canopy cover in our neighborhoods, we want to make sure that we're making really smart investments, that we're not just planting, but that we're thinking about what we want to get from those trees, what urban issues we want to address, what habitat value we want to increase in our neighborhoods.
Planting trees on streets and parks, creating urban cooling with trees is way more cost effective. The only thing is, it takes some time to get those trees to be big enough to create that shade. It's not as quick as building a building.
But with a few strategic investments, you could begin to build destinations, which among other things would bring benefits in terms of social engagement, in terms of active lifestyles, all kinds of things.
It is now my pleasure to introduce our special guests. Rachel Mollerich is the inaugural LA City Forest Officer appointed in 2019 by Mayor Eric Garcetti. She works to ensure that all of the city's departments and external partners use an integrated and equitable approach to implementing the urban forestry goals outlined in LA's Green New Deal. Before taking on this role, Rachel served as Assistant Director of Environmental Services for Koreatown Youth and Community Center, where she oversaw planting of thousands of trees in underserved communities. Rachel also spent a decade with Tree People, including 3 years as the Director of Forestry. Dr. Carol L. Foltz is our 12th president of the University of Southern California. She's an accomplished academic leader, an internationally renowned life scientist, and award-winning teacher. Throughout her career, Dr. Foltz has earned a reputation for placing students at the forefront, advancing academic excellence, setting ambitious goals, prioritizing shared governance, and focusing on the future. Before arriving at USC in 2019, she served as Chancellor of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and as Provost and Interim President of Dartmouth College. I'm going to kick it off with my first question in just 1 minute, but I want to let everybody know that if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A button, and we will try to get to as many as we can in the time we have at the end. So let me just kick it off, starting with Rachel. You were named the first ever City Forest Officer in Los Angeles after years of working with urban forestry nonprofits. Tell us about the path that led you to this role and some of your top priorities in this role now.
Thank you, Dean Miller, and thank you to you and to President Foltz for having me with you here today. I'm thrilled to be able to talk about this project and share about what we're doing at the city. So as you heard in my bio, I worked for 12 years with urban forestry nonprofits, working with communities to help them plan tree planting and educating the public about trees and the needs of trees in our urban environment, and particularly around urban canopy inequity. So some neighborhoods in Los Angeles have many trees, others don't. And that actually, my first role at Tree People was looking at how we could better communicate with neighborhoods that didn't have trees and help them to access the programs that were available through Tree People. I had a moment in my time at Tree People where I was asked to do some strategic planning, helping Tree People think about how the city could achieve some canopy targets and maybe across the city have some canopy levels that we hit. And in the process of doing that with my team, it became clear to me that we could plant trees year after year after year, but if the city didn't have adequate resources for maintaining those trees, good policies for preserving those trees, that we would never hit a canopy target that is areas covered by trees that would be allowing our communities to experience those benefits at the rates that we hope to. And so when the opportunity came for this role, the opportunity to look deeply at urban forestry policy with the mayor's leadership on looking at tree canopy and equity particularly, I was really thrilled for the opportunity to take this role and have an expanded impact, hopefully, on our urban forest and subsequently the residents of LA. So some of my key priorities is developing the city's first urban forest management plan. I know that sounds really thrilling to the participants. I want to build a plan, but ultimately that document is going to be both a vision of what we want our urban forest to look like and the roadmap for how we're going to get there. What are the policies that we need in place? What are the programs we need? What kind of engagement with our communities do we need in order to have the urban forest that we want to see here in Los Angeles? And then the second major goal for me right now is developing the strategy and a community-informed game plan for achieving the mayor's goal outlined in the Green New Deal around increasing tree canopy by 50% in areas of greatest need by 2028. That's a real, again, it's been an issue in Los Angeles for a long time. The mayor actually gave us a benchmark. We need to hit this by 2028. And that's part of what we've been working on this project, the Urban Trees Initiative, is seeing how being rooted in science and utilizing key partnerships like this one to help inform how we reach that goal.
Terrific. Similar question for you, Dr. Folt. You're an ecologist and research scientist who cares deeply about biodiversity. Can you just tell us a little bit about what drew you to this field and how it has informed your vision for sustainability here at USC?
Great, thank you, Dean Miller and Rachel. It's just so great to be with you up here, to be with all three of you, three people who I know care so deeply about the environment and are working on this amazing initiative together with the city of Los Angeles. It's just kind of a dream for an ecologist or an environmental scientist to be working on a problem like this one. So it's great to be here. And when I think about why I have developed or have this passion for the work that we're doing, a lot of it kind of goes back to how I grew up. I mean, I was in a very suburban neighborhood. I was in a set of houses that were all built at the same time, kind of decimated environment. But behind my house was a forest. And I spent virtually every bit of my free time as a kid with my brothers and sisters and all the kids in the neighborhood playing in that forest. And that forest had a stream. Now, in time, I've grown to appreciate it was a very polluted stream. But at the moment, that seemed like the most wonderful thing in the world to me, climbing trees, hiding in the shade of that forest, picking up rocks, studying the bugs and the insects. I can't say how much I wish that every kid growing up had a chance to have that access to nature, because I've never met a child that when they're exposed to the wonders of the natural world hasn't been deeply, deeply touched by it. So you carry that. I loved it. And when I went to school and eventually ended up at UC Santa Barbara, and I was studying many things, it was the environment that just caught my attention. And I think one of the reasons it did was beyond just loving it and seeing it, I began to understand that humans have an enormous influence, of course, on the environment. But that influence, while it can be destructive, can also be incredibly protective. I started to meet some of the most wonderful restoration ecologists, people that were restoring forests, people that were helping to build back eroded areas, people that were trying to turn deserts back into places that things could grow. So as a problem solver, that became extremely invigorating to me. And I got involved in my own research and trying to restore streams so that salmon could return to those streams. And truthfully, we did not succeed. I mean, salmon have not had a great restoration, but those streams are much healthier. There's habitat for other animals in those streams, and the people that use those streams have seen enormous success, changes in water quality. So I think that love of those natural places and a belief that humans, by altering environments, can alter them for the better really leads you to a belief in sustainability. When I came to USC, one of the reasons I wanted to be here is I thought this university should be a national leader, given our location, a history, and a need. And we'll come back to that later about why that's so important that we get cities right, because most people are living in cities. It's not just our semi-wild places we want to preserve. It's the environment that goes along with the city. But something like the urban tree environment and that project was so exciting. I had my own research on streams that showed that if you just restored 20 feet of what we call riparian vegetation, that's the vegetation that runs right along the edge of a stream. You put 20 feet of riparian vegetation back along a stream, and you can reduce the temperature in that stream by something like 10 to 20 degrees, and going from a desert stream to a thriving population of fish and insects. So thinking about that and trying to do that in communities that have been really left out when it comes to that natural environment just drew me into this fabulous project. And then you just have to come here and talk to our students and know that they're going to do it whether we're with them or not. So let's be with them and be part of that great change that's coming.
That's terrific. And you've teased my next question already, because I wanted to direct you a little bit toward, you're talking about the importance of preserving the natural world in the context of streams and the kind of environment. But what about in the urban context? I mean, why is this so critical in the urban context? And what's your thinking about the benefits that trees in particular bring within a big city like Los Angeles?
So I think that's it's really interesting. It's only about 20 years ago that biologists and ecologists started understanding that we needed to study the urban environment. That's when these long-term research programs were steadily developed to start looking at the urban environment. And actually, we have a situation where the projections tell us that 68% of the world's population will live in cities by 2050, which is up. I'm talking to people who know this very well, but is up from what it is right now. So we know that our cities are where people live, and the benefits of a fully functional environment to people's health, I think you started talking about them, to temperature, to air quality, to just quality of life and aesthetics, to our children's ability to appreciate and be outside in air, doing things that are really physically and emotionally beneficial, really mean that we have to get this right in our cities. We also know that the climate created by a decimated city extends beyond the city. So trees and buildings and pavement have a very big influence on the amount of, on the temperature of the planet when that starts building up, and certainly on the temperature of a region. So when you have increases in heat, and you could get Los Angeles to be better at holding on, not becoming a heat generator, but being better about preserving heat and including that moisture, you could start having a big influence beyond the local region. So it has influences on the climate of the area. So when you think about planting trees, it's in a way, it's such a simple concept. You can reduce pollution, you can improve the quality of the air, and you can give shade in a city that needs it. With an aging population, there's lots of data showing that people that just have to walk down these unshaded streets to get on a bus, to get to the hospital, to get medications, can suffer very adverse effects. And in fact, it can keep people indoors, away from help and social opportunities that they need. So it's not just about the environment and that long-term effect It's about people's lives. And so I think you can go back and talk to everyone that was working on that amazing committee about why that's important. But I love that it's starting right in the east side of Los Angeles and right together with the neighbors that live in the community so that they can help have a real say about the architecture and the nature of the plantings that will really be brought in and nurtured to improve the quality of living in those areas.
Rachel, I want to turn it to you and ask you also, what benefits do you see trees specifically bringing to our cities? And can you expand a little bit more on the city's urban forestry vision as outlined in the Green New Deal?
Yeah, and I love being on a panel where someone is able to describe even better than me the impact that trees can have on a larger scale. I think a lot about folks in our communities. Those that, as President Folt alluded to, maybe using public transit or walking, and that experience of, maybe being in a park space, hanging out with your friends and having that shade cover that is cool and comfortable versus, to go to the store or go to work, having to sit in a sun-baked, area waiting for a bus or walking. And that's why it's so critical, we have these issues of, potential for heat stroke and dehydration and other things. I mean, even this afternoon being outside, it's a really beautiful spring day, but it's going to be warm in the sun. And it's going to be even more so in the next couple months. And with climate change, we know that is only going to be an increasing problem. And I really see trees in our urban environment as an opportunity to improve that quality, not just the regional aspect that President Folt spoke to, but improving quality of life for those residents on those neighborhood streets. And it's really important to know what the right metrics are. And that's why I really enjoyed working with the USC project team. President Folt spoke about 20 feet of vegetation having a significant impact. And that's what we want to be doing with our trees, making sure that any tree that we plant isn't just another tree in the ground. More trees are good in general, but how do we maximize the benefits we receive from those trees, especially since we're using public funds to as a piece of our infrastructure. We're planting trees, maintaining them, preserving them in place. This isn't a natural environment where there is that natural life cycle. The tree isn't dropping seeds that then generate the next generation. We have to physically plant those next trees to make sure that they're in the right place with regards to our other infrastructure like light poles and fire hydrants. So we want to be really strategic in the planting of those trees so that we're maximizing the benefits to our communities. In terms of our vision, we're looking for a healthy urban forest where every neighborhood has the same access to the multiple benefits trees provide: mental and physical health, improved air quality, all of those, the urban issues that we have caused by the built environment, urban heat island, poor air quality because we've got cars and freeways, impermeability, all the roads that we have paved that cause the water to run off and not be soaking into the ground. Trees are a tool for remediating those issues, and we want that to be experienced by all of our residents across the city. And some of the, I think, opportunities that we have are, we have a wonderful nonprofit sector that is very robust and ready to plant those future trees. And USC is helping us think about what do we plant, how do we best accommodate those conflicts with infrastructure, and achieve those goals for all of our neighborhoods where space may be at a premium. As you saw in the video, you saw some spaces where typically we plant street trees in a parkway, that space between where the cars park and the sidewalk. And in some of those images, we saw no parkway space or very small parkway space, which means I can only plant no trees or a very small tree, just a very skinny tree, as opposed to one of those really big ones that can provide you with significant benefits.
Can you talk about some of the biggest challenges that you're facing in achieving these goals?
Definitely. So again, one is, those conflicts. Where do we find space for trees? And each neighborhood that doesn't have as much canopy cover as some of our more affluent areas that do have more canopy cover have a variety of reasons for not having trees. Maybe it's that issue of space that I was just addressing. Sometimes there's concerns about maintenance of those trees, because if urban trees aren't maintained, urban forestry looks at obviously achieving certain benefits for communities, but it also looks at mitigating risk. In the forest, a tree may fall over and it's not going to damage someone's house or car, or cause injury to a person. But in an urban environment, we do want to be looking at those trees on a regular basis to ensure that we make sure they live long, healthy lives and don't cause a risk to the people and property that are in LA. So that requires us having funding, ongoing funding, regardless of the economy, for tree maintenance, because we hear from communities, and even through this project, we heard from communities a concern about the city's ability to maintain trees over time. And so we'll be looking at that. One of our other challenges has been, honestly, the pandemic. You know, typically we would be, today I might have been out planting trees with volunteers, and definitely the weekends around Earth Day, we'd be out with large volunteer events, and we haven't had a large volunteer event since March of last year when we celebrated Arbor Day in Wilmington. And it's been a really bizarre year to not have these large volunteer events where we give people the opportunity to help beautify their neighborhood and make LA better, and have that increased planting activity.
So I want to make sure we leave a little time to get to everyone's questions, but it's Earth Week. So I want to close off this portion of the conversation by thinking about what we can all do to contribute to a healthier, greener city. And I just want to turn to Dr. Folt and ask if our USC community, if you could ask our USC community to do one thing to support sustainability, what would it be?
Whoa, one thing to support sustainability. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm gonna stall a little bit before I get to that answer. But I want to just say that one of the things that's so wonderful, if you're going to be an institution that's truly a partner in a community, being able to partner on things like this that improve the quality of living and also sustain the environment that we all care about is really important. And I think we've seen that this is something that is bringing neighbors and people that work here and this whole group together to figure out how not only to plant trees, but to sustain those trees and keep them as a vision of success. You know, I think it's really very discouraging if you plant a bunch of trees and they all die the next year. I do think that is disheartening, and it gives people a sense of hopelessness. This is the opposite. The whole point of this project is to bring people together and sustain. So sustain means that we're putting the effort in, not only to do it, but to nurture it and keep it going at a level that we think is going to really make a difference. So I like the idea that this is being done under sustainability. It's not being done because we want to impress everybody when they come to the Olympics that we've got a beautiful green city. That's nice, but that doesn't mean much. It's about creating one that will sustain and last, and knowing the long-term benefits that can have. It's putting in that real effort. I guess I think if I were to say to everybody, what is one thing you can do? My answer to that would be, you have to pick the one thing that you can do. There isn't just one thing that we all do. I think myself, do I need to fly less? Or am I better driving an electric car? I mean, I have assets so that I can drive an electric car. Is that good enough for me? Or is there something else? And I do really think that as a community, we can do things that really add up. One way I would talk to our students and everyone else is that if you tell yourself that the one thing you can do is just a little thing and it doesn't matter, then we'll lose. But if everybody can tell themselves the one thing they do actually matters, it adds up, it builds, then they'll do one thing, they'll do two things, they'll think twice about using paper bags. We'll all start doing many more things if we truly believe that the action of one will build to be the action of millions. And so that's probably where I'd go for thanks.
That's a great answer. Rachel, can I ask you if you could reach out to Angelenos and ask them to do one thing or a set of things? What would you ask them to do?
I continue to encourage people to learn more about trees, but I do appreciate President Folt's answer. And I think it's really important for us to each think about what we're ready to do in terms of sustainability. And if there's something we think that we should be doing and not doing it, maybe having a moment to have a chat with ourselves about why we're not doing that and start to understand where our resistance may lie to that change, or if it's a change that we don't have the right equipment. Like, let's just say I wanted to bike more instead of using my car, but I don't have a bike. I mean, that's an obvious one, but thinking about those kinds of things, what is the barrier to us making some of those changes? But typically I would be inviting you all to come volunteer, like I said earlier, and I do encourage you when we're able to get back together in person, that those volunteer hours of planting and caring for trees make a huge difference. They really do add up. In the meantime, again, I would encourage folks to continue to be curious about the environment. I wish I could encourage you all to fall in love more with science and knowing more about the complexity of our natural world and how it interacts with the urban environment. We do have some learning opportunities through the city, through the regular lunch and learn sessions that I host, as well as our upcoming tree summit on May 21st. But the last one for the USC students in particular, there's an opportunity with the Climate Corps Action Fellows through the state for summer fellowships. And there's an open application right now through April 30th for you to sign up to receive a stipend and spend some time this summer participating as a Climate Corps Action Fellow. So I would encourage USC students to look into that as a way to have an impact this summer with, again, a stipend attached.
Perfect. You just answered our first question, which is how can students help and get involved? So perfect answer. Another one, I think probably for Rachel, generally speaking, are community members interested in urban forestry?
Well, I think in communities, we typically will talk about trees rather than urban forestry. I know that today I may have been using some of the more technical language, but it really varies. It depends on the neighborhood. And the truth is everybody has a tree story. I, similar to President Folt, have memories of fruit trees in the backyard, picking cherries and spitting the pits and climbing trees with my cousins. And so I have really positive tree stories, but not everybody does. If they had a family member that was really stressed due to, a sewer issue that they attributed to a tree, they might have a negative feeling toward a tree. Or if they did have a limb from a tree fall on their first car, they would have a different tree story. And so it's usually, for me, when I talk with community members about trees, it's usually finding out where they are and having a chance to hear their stories and then be able to share how our urban forestry practices within this industry allow us to avoid some of those negative stories regarding trees, and how we're making decisions that incorporate some of that feedback from them.
And Rachel, if I can add one thing that I've always thought is something we have to really fight, and you were certainly not doing that, but it isn't really tree or no tree. It really isn't. We have come to be a place that has too many yes or no answers, so do you want a tree? And if we do that, we're going to take away the place that you sit and drink your coffee is not the answer. It's about how do we incorporate trees, healthy living, better air into a community. And that's why the community partnership that Rachel, you and others are so important about is helping people even pick the locations of trees and the types of trees and have them have much more understanding, because it's rarely that people say, I don't ever want a tree around me. They might say, I don't want to have these other things happen. And we have to be much more nuanced in the way we talk with people about what would it take to have you feel that your home was beautiful, that your land was something you were proud of. And I think that getting away from the yes or no to the continuum of answers is another aspect of the learning and the conversation that needs to go to make this successful.
That's a perfect lead in to the next question, which is, what does engagement with community members mean and look like?
Well, I'll take a stab and then I'll turn it back to Rachel, who's having a lot of experience on that. It really is, I'm going to say, breaking bread. Maybe we don't get to sit together and actually eat, but that thing, when you eat or you break bread with people, in a sort of a spiritual sense, that is a sharing. You're an opening, you're talking about things. I think we do need to do a lot more listening to each other and understanding that these rights of a good place to live, safety, equity, justice, are things that we share. And we aren't enemies across lines about how we achieve those. These are shared human values that everyone deserves to have access to. When we think about the environment in that way, and we think about breaking bread or getting to know people, what is it about their lives, what they're hoping, mostly for themselves and their children and their families, and how does the environment have a real effect on that, is really important. And every time we've done it, every time I sit in a community meeting, I have never gone away feeling that we didn't have a bridge we could build. Every single time I've done it, I've gone away inspired and, in fact, really driven by the aspiration that I hear. And so I think it takes time, because you don't just go in and tell people you have solutions. You have to really listen and build the solutions, but that's when it becomes robust, and that's when we'll build community. And I think that's really at the core of it.
I'll just add that when I was training community organizers in my previous roles, I told them that listening was our steps 1 through 10, different types of listening, whether it be different sites that they're considering, what kinds of trees they like or characteristics they like in trees. And I think food is huge. Is actually was a core value when I was at Tree People, was food. And I was one of the reasons I liked working there was that feeling that was an important thing for us to do together, as well as with communities. And so I would give double thumbs up to both those suggestions, and say that that's something I miss, obviously, with COVID, is being able to be with people in person and walk their neighborhood with them and hear them talk about what they hope for. But I also have appreciated that online tools have made it more easy for me to be more places, as currently I'm an office of 1 within the city. The Office of Forest Management is just me at this point. Being able to connect with more people without having to commute to those different parts of the city has been good. But I think we have a lot of work to do, and it starts with listening.
And Rachel, one of the things that people say, we can't make the environment part of a zero-sum game trade-off. It can't be communities, you can have healthcare or you can have trees. We have done way too much of that. And I think that's why right now we're so dependent on the volunteers and the small groups to really help. But this is a place where philanthropy and other things can help on some of these fundamental processes. But, quality of life and health and education isn't really something that we should be looking at as limiting the investment. We need to be finding ways to enhance those investments, because it will change the way people feel about our world and about their relationships. So I'm a big one for realizing we need to get investment there.
Well, I think that's a terrific place to close. I know we could talk about this all day, but we have to be conscious of the time and wrap up. There are a couple more questions that I see coming in having to do with what kinds of trees and what data is available to understand the existing tree canopy. And I'll refer folks to the Urban Trees Initiative Phase 1 report that lives now on our Public Exchange website. It has a ton of additional information. And I'd like to encourage folks also to look out for our Phase 2 that's coming along. I would like to give enormous thanks to both Rachel and to Dr. Folt for sharing so many terrific ideas and for supporting this outstanding partnership. We have a number of events scheduled for this Earth Week, so please tune in for as many as you can. And thank you all for joining us today.